Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Foreign Policy Analysis Week 2. That is Lesson 2. And it's titled what? Realism as a Foreign Policy. Today being the 26th of March 2024. Realism as a foreign policy. What would viewers gain from this? Except an explanation of realism, assumptions of realism, then of course the type of realism, hegemonic stability theories, and of course we'll be mentioning things like balance of power and balance of threat as a peace component. We'll be looking at realism as an anarchical tool, that of skepticism towards international law institutions, among others. And so let's go straight into it. What exactly is realism? Realism is more of understanding human groupings and the way they relate to other human groupings. Meaning that it is more natural to see humans as self-centered and competitive when dealing with other groups. When in a group and dealing with other groups, that is between groups. And sometimes within groups itself. All right. When push comes to shove, human beings naturally are not altruistic. They are non-benevolent in a way. It doesn't mean that we look at human beings from a pessimistic view, but human groupings from the kinship production era through feudalism, slavery, up until today, capitalism, or other forms of ideological economic theories, you realize that there's been so much anarchy, there's been so much war, there's territorial struggle, territorial integrity defending. And so human beings are territorial, just like animals are. Foxes are territorial. Dogs wee at a certain territory and they prevent others from coming in to their territory. Lions defend their territory sternly and even invade the territory of their lioness and do not want any other lion to get into their territory or the territory of their lioness. So this thing about territorial integrity is important when it comes to realism, and then it's anarchical or anarchy perception, or using anarchy as a way of defining a group's interest. There are three assumptions to realism, which gives us a better understanding of what realism is. Yes, we said that realism is got to do with being self-centered as a group or as an individual, then being competitive as a group against other groups. One of the assumptions is that there's a groupism. Since kinship production, people have lived in groups, and then firstborn males have taken the lead in production. And so when they all produce as a group, as a family, or as a clan, they share it. The firstborn son shares the proceeds to all members. The SS they keep in their courtyard, so they became the chiefs and all that, and so they keep in their courtyard. So then they gain some excess or surplus. So but generally it takes us into the second point, that is egoism. See, once people live in a group, self-interest becomes very, very prominent and observable. That the chief or the clan head who has a lot more in the group tends not to just be prominent, but having excess and wanting more for himself, though he may not be the top farmer or top hunter or top fisherman for that matter. So in modern times, you find countries competing, political contests happening, and then each member in a political party has a certain self-interest, wanting some particular positions for him or herself, and that they defend so much. When push comes to shove, they could be a non-governmental organization, but when push comes to shove, forget it. They will satisfy themselves first before they would do what the group wants. Even those who are poverty fighters, would have to be satisfied themselves before fighting poverty of other countries. All right. So groupism is one thing, and then the second one is egoism. Then the third assumption is what? Power centrism. Once people are in a group and the leader, say the chief, distributes the resources that they have all worked for and brought together, distribute, he keeps the excess for himself, or the king keeps the excess for himself and his courtyard. So the security in the courtyard, they get the excess of the king's share. So they have access, and that gives them a certain influence. See, it gives them that influence over other members. So kings normally want to have access so that they can have coercive force, coercive power. They want that power. If they have access, they can influence the other members. So they have that coercive force on the members, and that is one assumption that you can take of realism. Realism is what is the foundation of international relations. It is the foundation of international relations. So realism has got to do with being power conscious. You would have to know what is the group interest. Then you would have to find out how do you reconcile the group when there's a conflict. Even post-conflict resolutions are important between groups and within groups. Okay. The other bit is that we look at realism sometimes as anarchical or Machiavellian, but not necessarily so. However, reality has proven to us, historical reality has proven to us, the world has seen so many wars, and even as of today, 2024, we have wars going on, Russia-Ukraine war going on, Israel in Gaza, and other Syria war against ISIS. ISIS is Islamic State, IS, all going on. That notwithstanding, we only look at war. No, that's not the only war we are looking at. There's other contest that goes on, that fierce contest that goes on. See, you look at realism from that perspective, and you would understand. Is it a financial war? Or is it a technological war? What kind of war is it? You look at it from the realism point of view, and you would understand that. See, there's a certain key interest, and there's a certain dispassionate observation of what groups do and not what they ought to do. And that is what realism studies. What groups, you carry out a dispassionate observation of what groups do and not what they ought to do. Because when you go for what they ought to do, look, you wouldn't be a realist. You'll be in another world. Or the world yet to come that we don't know of. All right. We have, that's the assumptions of realism. Let's go to the types of realism. I'll just mention few. That's defensive and offensive and maybe soft realism. We have, when it comes to defensive realism, Waltz in 1996, he is one of the leaders of foreign policy, and it comes to realism. He's one of the key authorities. He looks at defensive realism from the point of view that, look, nation states, in recent times, nation states try to arm themselves, weaponize themselves to prevent what? Conquest and subjugating another state or nation. That is important. So they arm themselves so much. But when you arm yourself alone, it's not sufficient enough. You have to seek financial power. Then, of course, you have to seek the technological power. When you have technological power, financial power, and military power, then you know you are there. It prevents other states from taking you. You know, if it were that easy, 1972, United States of America, would have taken over, would have captured North Vietnam. But that war, the US really lost. So there's this balance of power showing there. See, you arm one state arms and another state arms, all the state arms themselves. It brings about that balance of power, and peace is assured. Once you know, when you get into that state with war or anarchy, you will not have it easy. Then, of course, there's going to be some relative peace for a while. You look at that as balance of power. But for how long can that balance of powers hold? We don't know, because some other states will arm themselves more than others, in military-wise, technological-wise, and finance-wise. And that's where offensive realism comes in. With offensive realism, some states decide to arm themselves very fast and more complicated and more advanced than the rest of the other states. So they become superpowers. When they become that superpower, then of course they try to segregate or partition other states in a certain lower category in terms of the arms they have, or the financial ability, or the technological advancement they have. So you can find a Security Council having a group, a UN Security Council or group of 6. Then you then have the BRICS countries, that's the advanced developing countries. Then you have the least developing countries. Those are issues that comes up so clear. Once they have been able to categorize countries or nations in that order, they are the superpowers. Then the others are maybe advanced developing, and then the developing, in that order, in that hierarchical order of authority and in terms of power. It brings a certain balance of power, and then it brings about, there's this balance of threat. You know, the threat is lower when it's coming from a least developing country to an advanced developing country. So rules must be made, and rules have been made, and that's how come we mention United Nations Security Council. They are the only international institution that declares war in this world. However, in 1972 war that US went to, they couldn't, they lost, because North Vietnam was a least developing country, but they defeated USA, which was a superpower. So then this issue of balance of power is sometimes not well understood, or it's not so clear. But at least when it comes to defensive realism, North Korea defended themselves, and they prevented being conquered by the United States of America, which is a highly militarized country. You look at it again, and then you'd understand why the US has gone for offensive realism and then categorize other countries as least developing and then advanced developing, and they are the superpowers because of that dominance they want. With that dominance, we call it hegemonic stability theory. Once you have a certain group of countries or nations in a certain group as highly militarized or advanced countries, and financial power they do have, technological power they do have. Let's take a break, by the way. We'll come back to offensive hegemonic stability theory. Let's take a break here. Welcome back to realism as a foreign policy. So far, we've tried to understand what realism is. We've moved on to look at the assumptions, and we're looking at the types of realism. We talked about defensive realism, where all states try to arm themselves sufficiently to prevent conquest, to being conquered or being subjugated. All right. Then the other one we're talking about before we went on break was hegemonic stability theory. Before then, offensive realism is some countries arm themselves above all others, so they put others in a certain category, in a lower category of threat, or military-wise. Say we have advanced, they are the advanced developed countries, or they are the developed countries. Then we have the advancing developing countries. Then we have the least developing countries. Okay, so based on that, any threat from the least developing country is not so much of a worry, because there are rules. And in that room, UN Security Council is the only organization that declares war. If that be the case, it sends us to hegemonic stability theory, that they must put in rules, that there must be dominance by some states in the world. Some nations must have that dominance to control almost everything in the world, so that there is peace. They will define what war is and what peace is. And that's what UN Security Council the permanent 5 members of the UN Security Council is therefore one of the key reasons. In that sense, we're going to ask ourselves, did US, United States of America, realize that the war, Gulf War II, that they declared in 2003, was it legitimate? Or was it out of hegemonic stability theory? Was it an offensive realism? They went into Iraq with the belief that there was weapons of mass destruction. So per UN Security Council Resolution 1441, they asked Iraq to disarm, demolish its weapons of mass destruction. But then UN General Assembly voted against that war because that war, that Gulf War II, was what? Meaningless and was illegal. The reason it was illegal was simply because there was no war going on in Iraq. Iraq was in peacetime, and then US pounced on them, believing that there were weapons of mass destruction. They went in there, pulled down so many things, and they never found any weapons of mass destruction. They blamed Saddam for being a bad man, a bad leader, whose hands are carrying weapons of mass destruction. But they killed the leader, and they found no weapons of mass destruction. So US and those states that went, UK and co, the allied forces that went into Iraq, they went there on an illegal basis. Very illegal, of which the International Court of Justice also states is illegal, just as the UN General Assembly states is illegal. All right. But Gulf War I is a different story because Iraq had gone to invade Kuwait, so they had to push them off. That was an aggression used on aggression to bring peace. But Gulf War II there was peace. There was no aggression, but US entered and then created all the problems. All right. Then you also ask yourself, so what's happening in Russia and Ukraine war? That started in February 2022. Was that offensive realism or defensive realism? You find out that Russia was trying to protect its sphere of influence, geographical sphere of influence, because they are closer to them. And they are superpower as against Ukraine, that's not a superpower. So they would have to protect that area as against NATO's expansion. NATO was expanding into East Europe. And so Russia had to threaten that, look, if you keep expanding and you want Ukraine, then of course we will have to go to war against Ukraine amidst others. As to what will happen, today being March 2024, 2 years on, Russia has not been able to conquer Ukraine. It has not subjected it to any form of conquest or any colonial rule yet. Donetsk and Lugansk have still not been withdrawn from Ukraine. So it's not easy, even if you think you're a superpower and you want to go to war against a least developing country, you will not have it easy because there's always that fear of balance of power. And it's showing clearly in foreign policy. That notwithstanding, in that same war, Russia threatened Finland and then Sweden that if they join NATO, it will become problematic. But Finland has joined NATO. Sweden is almost joining NATO. So we're watching. With foreign policy, you just watch, observe, dispassionate observation. Then you can make meaning of what the practitioners are doing. That's the thing with foreign policy analysis. What the practitioners are doing, you only can understand it when they finish doing it, not what they opt to do. So we see what happens to Finland and then Sweden, but it tells us that there's a long war ahead. There's no peace yet. It's going to be a long war ahead. And so hegemonic stability theory seems to work, but it comes with balance of power and balance of threat to give peace. And that is one area that we have to be mindful of. In that sense, realism itself does not create anarchy, but they use anarchy as a plan. Realism do not create anarchy, but they use anarchy as the base to plan against the future. So realism is better understood from foreign policy with anarchy and then pessimism and cynicism as key words to watch. Then realism, it's more skeptical about international legal institutions. international law regulations, you would have noticed, like we said earlier on last week, that see, states think that they are bigger than the ethics of international relations. So they do not respect ethics. And realism is also telling us the same thing. Either than that, the US will not go to war against a country that is peaceful. US went to war in Afghanistan. There was no war in Afghanistan, but they went there looking for terrorists. And so they bomb, and they finally had to leave. Did they achieve anything? No, they only wasted money and killed so many lives. Realism itself is what this, it's not anarchy oriented, but it uses anarchy as a game plan, see, to surge its onslaught so that to establish its dominance. See, that power, that realism has got to do with that power, selfish interest, and egoism, that selfish interest, and then groupism. Those are issues with realism. So we have to be a bit more careful that realism has a certain tendency of evil. Yes, that's why it is anarchy. They lack power. The world has not changed too far. Before, it was fighting for resources, groups fighting for a territorial space. Now that most of the territories have been defined, groups went to fight on monarchical basis. After monarchical basis, groups went to fight for religious basis, and now groups are fighting back for resources. And then they are fighting for control, ideological control. They are expanding ideologically. Liberalism is also pushed around as part of it. And the US is pushing liberalism with Christianity, and that becomes problematic. It should have left Christianity out and pushed liberalism as it is, but it is not doing that. So that's not realism. Realism is that, look, what are they doing now? And that's what you're analyzing. The name is H. Kwame Afaglu. If you have any question, please don't hesitate to send to the email posted above or the WhatsApp number posted above. But generally, this is realism. Realism is about looking at individuals or group of people as being self-centered and competitive. And when push comes to shove, altruism is not part of it, or benevolence is not part of it. Thank you.